Okay, so we took the Lelit Bianca apart just to trace where the plastics were happening. Now, in these two steam wands, the steam wand and the hot water wand, there were some either PTFE or Teflon tubes that I was able to remove by removing the tip. This one was a little tricky. I actually had to use a drill bit to kind of snag it and pull it out. But now these get hot when they are being used really hot, so you gotta be careful. But I did speak with the manufacturer, and it doesn't hurt anything to remove them. And I was really curious about the routing behind and inside of this thing. So I took it apart, took the case off, and just wanted to kind of go through a little diagram of how everything's put together and where the incoming water is and kind of trace how everything works. So you can see down here, that's the incoming water, which comes up into a motor, right? So this is a pump, and that is the centrifugal part of the pump. So you can see the incoming and outgoing, all copper piping, which is important. There's the AC motor, and when this thing is on, the copper piping is coming up through there and then out through this tube. And we're tracing that all the way up here to the first solenoid valve. So this valve is electronically controlled, and you can see there's a small tube coming off of it. This is heading over to the pressure gauge on the front of the machine. So this is the pump pressure. And then that solenoid valve then runs into a four-way valve, which is giving us another solenoid on one side, and then the pump here. So let's take the first detour up, which I think is a safety overflow. And then this is going to plastic. Now let's trace that plastic, right? It comes all the way around to this side to a four-way valve. So that four-way juncture there drains on the bottom down into the front tray. You can also see this, which is the first, well, this is a pressure chamber and a heat chamber. That this feeds the steam and the hot water. This also has an entryway into that four-way valve right here. And there is a fourth one, which is entering here, so the top. So there's probably multiple chambers inside of this pressure tank, and this feeds both the hot water and the steam. So those are really the four exit points for pressure, for returning water back to the system. So if we go back to this solenoid and the first four-way valve, the next exit point here is one where we are feeding around and over to the top of the secondary heating chamber, and this is what pushes pressure to the actual coffee itself. And so inside of this, you can see the hot water coming in from that four-way valve, and then you can see here we've got 2 points of exit. So this is first the paddle, right? So this tube is controlling pressure feedback for the paddle itself. And then we are feeding this second line, which is the coffee. Sorry, let's see there. The coffee line is right below it. And that line comes down and around and is coming out of the bottom, right? Because that's where the hot water is. There'll be pressure on top, and there's just probably some mechanisms inside of there that control how much pressure is being allowed to release from that chamber. And then the last routing here, we got to look at this side, which is controlled by a valve. So the paddle doesn't have a solenoid, but this valve turns on here when we have, when this is open. This is feeding all around. Okay, so let's trace this. So we're coming around the outside. It's that line right there to the top of the steam and hot water chamber. So in this hot water chamber has the first one, which comes out and around, and that is the steam coming off the top. And off the bottom here, we're tracing up, and that is hitting the control valve for the hot water, which is really just I think a screw valve. It's like a gate valve, hot water and steam. And that's really the end. So, I mean, what we wanted to show here is that for the Lelit Bianca, everything that is touching the hot water, if you remove the tubes in the front, is copper, right? And we're assuming the copper is going to be robust enough to make sure that everything is just like copper pipes in your house, dealing with hot water, making sure that everything is free of plastics before it touches your coffee. And if you are using the steam wand and you are using the hot water wand, if you pull out those tubes, and I can show you here the tubes that we did pull out here, they're actually right. I saved them, at least one of them. And you can see this was the tube that basically just came right out of there. Yep, and you can just pull it right out. Manufacturer did not recommend it for safety reasons, but if you want to pull this out because you're worried about plastics, you just got to make sure not to burn yourself. And then the wiring just makes sense, right? This is controls and there's a microcontroller in there. But this is overall a great machine.